Hello and welcome to our aerospace supply chain 3D experience web series with XD Innovation. I am Sufyan El-Amili and I'm joined today with my colleague Bob Garrison. And again, thank you for attending this webinar. We're going to go over the agenda really quickly. So we'll go a little bit into who is XD Innovation and what is it that we do. We'll go over 3D experience and why should aerospace suppliers care about 3D experience. And then my colleague Bob will walk us through a 3D experience showcase for today's topic. And then we'll leave you with some final thoughts. So really quickly, just a little bit about us. XD Innovation is a digital transformation and Industry 4.0 consulting firm. We are a Dassault Systems partner, a platinum partner for Dassault Systems, as well as a education center and a certification center for Dassault Systems products. We are specialists in everything manufacturing and hardware product development. And we provide a lot of solutions, software services, and consulting type services around 3D CAD, PLM, simulation, manufacturing, and cloud solutions. We were founded back in 2014 through our legacy companies. We are 25 strong across 7 locations, and we have 2 innovation labs in North America, both in Silicon Valley and Montreal. Just to go a little bit about 3D experience, a lot of buzz has been going on around 3D experience. And what is 3D experience? So basically, 3D experience is a unified digital platform that Dassault developed to house the different applications that Dassault Systems offers. So that would include the 3D modeling tools such as SolidWorks and Catia, the virtual reality tools in terms of virtual and digital manufacturing with Delmia, and test and validation type activities with Simulia and the legacy Abacus tools. And then in terms of intelligence, we're talking about XLead, which is a search appliance, as well as NetVibes, which is a dashboarding type application. And throughout this webinar, you'll see a lot of Innovia applications as it relates to PLM and overall collaboration. So 3D Experience really is a platform where all of these applications become part of a digital platform to eliminate silos, establish a digital continuity and connectivity between all departments from engineering, manufacturing, supply chain, design, and others. So who uses 3D Experience? So 3D Experience is used by 250,000 customers to date with over 25 million users. And in terms of the OEM, the Aerospace Oem Adoption of 3D Experience, you can see that a lot of companies as Boeing and Airbus have announced very strategic adoption of 3D Experience, as well as a lot of the other companies such as Bell or Cessna, others. So as a lot of these OEMs are developing strategies to deploy 3D Experience, we here at XD Innovation have developed a aerospace suppliers packages. So suppliers today can benefit from the exact same technology as the OEMs, and all of this delivered either on-premise or on the cloud through some very flexible licensing and deployment methodologies. So this includes PLM, obviously with 3D Experience, but also products like Catia V5 or Catia 3D Experience, and specialized packages for electrical and composites type applications. We also have packages for manufacturing that would include our CNC machining type applications, as well as manufacturing planning and simulation. And finally, the virtual testing and validation applications powered by Simulia, which include the Abacus CAE and 3D Experience Simulia packages for FEA, CAE, and CFD type packages. So for today's session, this is again the first of a series of webinars where we'll cover a lot of these different packages. So for today's session, we're really going to hone in around PLM essentials as it relates to and Catia. So you'll see a little bit of Innovia, you'll see a little bit of Catia. We'll go over some 3D experience, Catia 3D experience basics. That also includes revisions, life cycles, and workflows. We'll also show how the 3D experience platform can manage and handle multi-CAD with Catia 3D experience, Catia V5, and SolidWorks. And really this is done to simplify online collaboration between OEMs and their suppliers that may be using different CAD packages. So with that being said, I'm going to hand it over to my colleague Bob, and Bob will walk us over today's showcase.
Thank you very much, Sufyan. And welcome to the webinar. As Sufyan mentioned, this is a multi-part webinar, and today we're going to focus on part one of this unified product structure powered by strategy. Here you see a traditional Catia V5 session running and a window browser to browse files, and then products are typically opened up from a file-based system. Some suppliers have implemented PDM systems to manage that data, but essentially it's all file-based. Here we see a CAT product of a consumer drone. We can look at traditional saving mechanisms, but once again, all individual files of each part, sub-assemblies, subcomponents, and so forth. This is the way aerospace suppliers have been working throughout the last 20 years in this environment of aerospace. In this environment, we can navigate down, obviously, and other suppliers who may be working on subsets of this drone can retrieve and work with individual components where they may be responsible for this design. But the collaboration of changes between these designs, since they are file-based, is simply to then make the changes, save the file, email the file, or hand the file off in some other method to their customer. In 3D Experience, here we see a login to the 3D Experience platform. We're entering through a web browser. So this is a hallmark of the Experience platform, is any web browser will give you access, and there are many tools that are built into this web browser that the user can navigate. When they log in with their credentials, they are assigned specific roles in the system. These roles give access to specific apps. So in this scenario, you can see a number of the Catia design apps, plus Catia V5 integration and SolidWorks integration. Now, these two integrations are part of the Power By strategy, and we're going to dive deeper into those two applications in part two of this webinar series. But in this scenario here, the user can navigate around, look at various tools. In the north quadrant, as Sufyan mentioned, there are tools to reveal information, perform collaboration, to go in and do translations or conversions of data without having a CAD system present. In the east quadrant, we have other tools for high-speed search, metadata related to parts and products, physical products, and other data, where documents, PDF files, and so forth can be searched in that way. And then finally, in the southern quadrant, we have the simulation applications. So all of these tools are accessing one common database, an object-oriented relational database with metadata that is independently stored and linked back to vaults and other sources of the heavier data that facilitate that high-speed search. Now, in this scenario, we're launching from the web browser the latest generation of Catia, 3D Experience Catia app. The launcher launches this application as a separate thick client application on the desktop so that it can maximize the value of the graphics processing unit and so forth within the desktop. So it is not run in the browser, and you get the full performance of your engineering workstation in this scenario, the same workstation you're running Catia V5 or SolidWorks today. Here you can see that you can actually import that Catia V5 product we were just looking at, or any Catia V5 data for that matter, directly into the database. And we're using a strategy here that's been around for years called coexistence. So we're actually in this scenario going to do a conversion of the V5 data using mapping tables, and we'll convert it to the complete Catia 3D experience application format. You'll note in here that there's an update option, and we'll talk about that a little bit later in this demonstration. But once this import is taking place within 3D experience, as you've seen here, and converted to Catia 3D experience data, it now has an association, or it has a history embedded in its metadata of where it came from. It's not directly linked to the V5 data in this scenario, but it does know where it came from, and any changes made to that data and brought back or re-imported back into this environment will automatically update that data, depending on the selections we make. In this scenario, the drone is missing the motors that drive the fans. And so we've done this to simulate what might occur in real life, which is we'll have another supplier involved in this, and they may be responsible for that motor design. We'll come back to that here in a moment. As part of the web browser and the suite of apps that are in there, we can search, and you see on the right-hand side here, a search of all the various components, and including the drone, but other products and parts and other data that may exist in the database. And once we find the drone, we can look at the related objects and go to the Relational Explorer. And from the Relational Explorer, we can see all the history from that product down to all of its children. If this product were included in a higher level product, we could likewise go and search for its parents. So this is the power of a relational database versus a file-based system, is that we can do these types of navigations and find other parts that might be impacted by changes that we make. Included in the web browser as well is, and as a part of the base package, so it's not something that you purchase separately, is the 3D Play application. 3D Play allows any non-CAD users to come in and view lightweight representations of any CAD data that's been brought into 3D experience, whether it's a native Catia or an imported Catia V5, or if it's mastered by V5, as we'll see in the second webinar series. You can section through, take measurements, apply annotations, do all of the types of interrogations that a casual engineer who doesn't have access to CAD, or maybe a planner or a QA person, anybody else in the organization that might have needs to consume this data or interrogate this data can do so. It's not altering the original design data. This is providing a visualization layer on top of it. These markups and measurements and other annotations that are placed in here can be saved and shared with other users in the system, and are saved in the database along with all of the data pertinent to this. So here you see a quick markup with text and a sketch to validate some thermal, requesting to validate some thermal clearance in this section of the drone. This is very powerful because in previous iterations, such as with Catia V5, you had to either buy a seat of Catia V5, or you had to get a seat of DM1 viewer or some other tool in order to do these types of visualizations and markups. However, in 3D experience, it's built right into the platform, and it's accessible from a web browser. So this doesn't have to have a native application client installed to do these types of queries. Also built into the web browser is the Product Structure Explorer. And product structure can be explored, it can be modified, it can be reorganized. There's a number of tools and capabilities to do that, and we'll dive deeper in our second web session on this. But here you see the structure of the drone. You see all the constituent subassemblies and parts. You can see what revision level they're at. Some of these are revision B. Some of the individual parts are still at revision A. You can see who's responsible for those parts. In this case, it's one user. You can see what type of part they are, and you can see what the CAD master was. So in this case, Catia 3D Experience was the CAD master. However, in the second session that we'll do on the unified product structure, you'll see where SolidWorks or Catia V5 can retain mastership over this data. So now we've brought back the drone in the native app, the thick client of Catia 3D Experience, and we're going to go visit the supplier who's designing the motor for this. So it's a smaller assembly. It's in Catia V5 format. We're going to do the same thing that we did earlier, which is to import that data. However, we're going to use this same scenario in session 2 where we'll keep it native. But in this case, we'll take the motor, we're going to bring it in as new, so it's doing another conversion. You can see the conversion take place after the import. It will all be native Catia 3D Experience at this point. Now, one thing to point out in these conversions is that in Catia V5, where you may have assembly constraints and things of that nature, they get converted into what are referred to as engineering connections within 3D Experience platforms. So you can see some Revolutes that are in here, some user-defined connections, but all of the history and feature history are there. But getting back to those connections for a moment, this provides you with the capability to use those to drive kinematic type studies. Now, we've opened up one constituent part of this, this assembly in 3D Experience. We'll likewise do the same in Catia V5. So this is the supplier now back in their V5 environment, and they've decided to make a change to this. So they're going to add a little bit of champering around the top edge there, and they'll put in a guide pilot hole at one point of this piece. So a slight modification has now been made by the supplier in Catia V5. They save it. They then hand this off in a manual method, which we'll see how this works with PowerBuy in session 2, but they'll hand it off, and now the 3D Experience OEM or user will re-import this, and in the re-import process, 3D Experience Catia knows that this has been brought in before. So it does not go out and simply create another duplication of this. It updates the originally imported part, as you saw in that example. That part then had its chamfer on the edge, and if we bring into the total assembly, we can see that the assembly is likewise updated with that chamfer and with the guide hole. So this is pretty powerful. This is the way in which integration with Catia V5 and 3D Experience has worked for many years, going back probably a good decade now. However, there are changes where this conversion doesn't have to take place, so we couldn't show all of that in this brief demonstration. But we certainly hope you come back for part 2 and see how that PowerBuy strategy improves upon this even more. So in this case, we've now taken the Catia 3D Experience model and updated it by changing that hole to a tapered hole. And we go through the save option here, which gives us some access to a brief glimpse at what's called the BI Essentials or Business Intelligence Essentials, which is used in a number of places, not just for the save mechanism, but if we apply weights and we want to see where weight distributions are on parts and things of that nature, BI Essentials is a very powerful tool in 3D Experience to do that. So now that we've made those changes and saved it, what can we do? Well, we can export it if we want to send it back to our supplier or if we want to send it to somebody else. And when we do the export, if we export it as a Catia file, it's going to be Catia V5. If we export it as 3D XML, it's going to retain its 3D Experience characteristics, or we could simply export STEP, STL, and all the other standard outputs that are typical in this industry. If we send this out from 3D Experience Catia to Catia V5, we cannot use coexistence, because in making these changes in Catia V6 and saving them in Catia 3D Experience, then we have now made 3D Experience the master for this. which means what? When we send this out to Catia v5, and now that Catia v5 user goes to open it up, can they make changes? Can they access that data? We'll see shortly that they certainly can. From this report, we can see that this data was all output. It's now got a v5 component to it. If we go back and open that up, that export that we just did, we can see that all of the features of that still exist. They're editable. So the Catia v5 user can do their standard practices with this, even though it was completely developed for all intents and purposes from 3D Experience platform. What they cannot do is make changes in that and then re-import it back to 3D Experience. 3D Experience will then reject it and say, no, I've already mastered this data, and you're not authorized to bring those changes back to me. And that's one of the natures of coexistence. We'll see in the power by strategy or unified product structure that that's not an issue. Here in the assembly design, we've opened up a spreadsheet or a view of this data so we can see what collaborative policies are used to control the data. We can see what revision levels and so forth are there, who owns the data, and a variety of other information, which is a part of the overarching life cycle workflow attributes of Catia data in the 3D Experience platform. And we can actually modify those as a designer or as a leader by going into tools such as collaborative lifecycle. And in collaborative lifecycle management, we can reserve components that we might be working on. So here at the bottom, we're using the lifecycle toolbars of collaboration. And as a designer, I may go in and elect to reserve this so that nobody else can make modifications to it while it's in my hands. And then I may go into the lifecycle management and change the maturity of this to put it into a different state. So right now it's been in work up to this point. We may want to freeze this and then cycle it around for review, as we saw with 3D Play earlier, or we may want to release it after review. So after everybody's had their input in the enterprise, we come back, we release it, and move on to the next maturity level of it. So returning back to the web browser and looking at the 3D Experience capability for routing, we see it's in frozen right now. It can go to released, it can go to obsolete. There are other cycles that we can put in here to put approval routes and other inputs from other people in the enterprise to this data. Looking at the motor in the Relational Explorer, once again, as we did with the drone earlier, we can see that there's quite a bit of data there. Now, in this scenario, we're looking at a SolidWorks native data, and this is another consumer drone, completely designed in SolidWorks. We then go back to 3D Experience platform, and we do the same type of import as we had done earlier. In this case, though, we're going to import the SolidWorks assembly. So same tools, import. We're doing the SLD ASM, the SolidWorks assembly. It could be a PRT file, could be an ASM file. So depending on the type of SolidWorks data you have and what release level you're at, you can then specify it, browse to wherever that file-based SolidWorks data is at, and then go ahead and do the import. It will do the conversion. You'll notice in this dialog, though, there's no coexistence option. Coexistence does not exist for SolidWorks data, only for Catia v5. And since SolidWorks is based on Parasolids kernel and Catia is not, then it will also do a conversion to a datum solid of each one of these features. However, you still get all the SolidWorks data displayed. You can interrogate it, work with it, you can life cycle it, you can take ownership of it, you can route it, you can build out the product structures, just as we saw earlier with the Catia v5 data. In the second session that we'll do, simply because this subject matter is so lengthy, we decided to break it into two. We'll see a different option for bringing in the SolidWorks data via the power by structure. And in both of those cases, either Catia V5 or in SolidWorks, when we talk about power by, we're talking about a direct connection from SolidWorks or Catia V5 to 3D Experience. So you're uploading from there directly from the authoring tool. You are not handing off a file and then having to import that file with a conversion. You can mix all of this up in any fashion that's expedient to your business, obviously, but we'll see that Power BI is extremely more powerful in that regard. So here we see that we can take this data, import it, bring it into the environment. We can take and create a brand new Catia 3D Experience physical product, give it a name. And so we might have, say, a master assembly in this case. Above and beyond this, perhaps we're going to put in tooling and other things to accommodate the drone. And then simply through a couple of right clicks and selections, we can bring that existing SolidWorks drone product into the master assembly. So here we just navigate over through the tabs that display each item that we have open in session. And now the quadcopter is incorporated into a 3D Experience product structure. And even furthermore, I could insert Catia V5 parts into it, and likewise in the same fashion, and put Catia 3D Experience products and parts into this environment and have them all interoperate together. And of course, the Power BI and unified product structure goes way beyond just Catia V5 and SolidWorks, which are hallmarks of Dassault systems. It includes PTC Creo, Siemens NX data, so you can truly have a mixed digital mock-up containing master data from a variety of sources, which gives aerospace suppliers and even the OEMs for that matter, quite a bit of flexibility in regards to the modeling practices and communication of design intent and manufacturing intent across the enterprise. You see here the Catia part has been added, 3D shape has been added, and the drone is ready for further development. So that concludes our first part of this, just giving you a flavor for the integration. This is very simple to get your hands around as a supplier. But the next webinar, we'll take it up a little bit of a higher level and show you the more powerful capability of the Power BI strategy and unified product structure.
That's great. Thank you very much, Bob. I really appreciate your presentation here. So just before we close out our webinars, we want to just kind of reiterate some key elements of our webinar today. So really what we're advocating is for aerospace suppliers to prepare for the future, but without sacrificing, the investment and the tool sets and infrastructure they have today. So as you could see, you could collaborate with any type of OEM, whether you are a SolidWorks user, a Catia V5 user, or any CAD user for that matter. You could have a digital environment where you can collaborate with your OEMs, use the exact same technology, have multi-CAD, DMU, and really just accelerate what you have in terms of infrastructure and powering that with 3D Experience that, again, can be delivered either on the cloud or on-premise, very flexible type of licensing that are offered to small and medium-sized businesses. And again, thank you for attending our webinar today. This is kind of the way to get into contact with us, either by email, our website, or by phone. Myself, Sufyan, and Bob would be happy to take any calls or questions. But maybe before we go here, just some final thoughts, Bob, and we can close out our webinar.
Sure. Thank you, Sufyan, and thanks to the audience that has attended this webinar. We know that there's rapid change going on in our world, in our society, and in our industries and the companies we work for. And the aerospace is certainly under that type of lens as well. As new programs are coming into play, and they're coming into play even today at companies like Bell Helicopter with new designs that they're producing, and others who have already implemented 3D experience. 3D experience is not new. It's been around for some time. What we know in all of this is that the suppliers to those types of OEMs, and Boeing and Airbus looming down the road not too far away, suppliers are going to be expected to be prepared for that collaborative process, a collaborative process that involves 3D experience platform. So I guess my final thoughts would be that you can wait until it arrives at your doorstep or the golden contract is awarded to you and then figure out how to do it then. Or you can start to ease your way in without sacrificing your existing tools that you have today and begin to get your hands around this. It's really not complicated, and with cloud-based solutions, it's not even that expensive. It certainly doesn't require all the horsepower and IT infrastructure to do it. The Power by technology is extremely powerful to help you keep the tools and methods that you have today and leverage 3D experience. But more importantly for you is going forward, I would think that going to an OEM to secure a contract with them and telling them we have 3D experience and we're familiar with it and we're preparing right along with you for the future is going to be a very powerful selling point for your company and your organizations.
All right, thank you, Bob. Thank you to our audience for attending today's webinar. Again, we'll have a series of these webinars. The next one is we'll go a little bit deeper into this multi-CAD coexistence, and we'll have some around manufacturing, simulation, and deeper PLM topics. Thank you again, and we'll see you at our next webinar. Thank you.